Okay, it is live streaming now.
Yep. Good morning, everybody. We had a few technical difficulties, but I think we're okay now. I'd like to call the regular board meeting of the South Coast British Columbia Transportation Authority Police Board to order. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land on which the Metro Vancouver Transit Police operates is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Lower Mainland Coast Salish people. And I would like to give thanks for their hospitality on these lands. Shall we move to item 1.1 on the consent agenda? Has anyone had a chance, everyone's had a chance to read the material, and does anyone have any comments?
I've got a comment on 1D, 1.1D.
Okay.
Do we want to remove it from the agenda, or it's just a simple comment? I'm not sure we need to remove it. The comment I have is,
let's remove it, Murray, and then we can have a conversation in case that leads, and we can deal with the rest of it.
Okay.
Anybody else have any comments on anything else? Okay. Why don't we?
So I'll move it with D removed.
Thank you. Got that, Taryn? Okay. Thank you, Murray. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. And we can move to item 1.3, which is the item that you wanted to talk about.
Yes, thank you. I just, the comment I had was chart 3 on page 3 of 6.
Mm-hmm.
Looked a little odd. It compared the first quarter of 2020 with full years for previous years. And I was thinking that seemed a little odd that we would show it should either be first quarter all the way across or not show it at all, because one quarter against a full year doesn't mean much. So I would just suggest that be amended to either should show first quarter results all the way across the table, in my opinion.
Okay.
Does that make sense to
everybody?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any comments on this?
So the only comment would be, it does show a progression. You can tell at the first quarter where you're at in previous year's totals. So I see there is advantage to presenting the statistics in both ways. I'm not certain that one is preferable to the other necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
Just on that point, then I'll just jump in, because the other way to do it is you could provide different shading within the full year totals to show what it was for the quarter.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. I like that.
Right.
It just didn't mean much to me when I looked at it. I couldn't tell. I mean, if you say that you multiply the first quarter times 4, but I'm not sure that's the way it works. So,
right.
Anyway, that's a good idea, Adam. So, you want that moved then, Sarah?
Sure, unless anybody else has any other comments.
I think if you want, we can just take it as direction, and we'll make sure that the chart is changed to reflect what you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do we need to move receipt of that item as well?
Yes, we do.
So I'll move that.
Thank you, Murray. Okay. All in favor?
And I will second.
Thank you. All right. Taryn, do we have any public delegations today?
No, we do not.
We do not. And have we got any report from the item 3.1, the TPPA? No?
We don't, no.
The Trans Police Professional Association. Okay, let's move on to item 3.2, the Chief Officer report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there is one part in here which will be a presentation. I don't know if we want to do that one first, Stephen. Do you have that?
Yeah, I'll just bring that up on screen. Give me one moment.
Okay, so while okay, I'll just wait. It should just take a sec. This report you're about to hear was also given, and Murray would have heard it yesterday at the TransLink board. So this is it'll cover a bit of things. So next slide, Stephen. So of course it's a bit of an update we gave yesterday on operating during COVID-19. So a bit of it is, we all know that when the pandemic really started and kicked off in about March of this year, we had to refocus some of our immediate activities and for both our member safety, for public safety, organizational, and it started this, significant changes as to what happened. So one of the first things of operating during COVID-19 was ensuring the safety of the employees and passengers. That included our own staff, transportation staff, and of course the passengers and people who are in and around the transportation hubs. Part of that was the procuring and also defining of safety equipment, whether it had been gloves, masks, goggles, hand sanitizing, social distancing in the office. This became a key part of it, as many people would know, that were faced with some changing dynamics, such as public health orders, enforceability, whether they were recommended or enforceable, and of course our members' own health concerns. We did adapt our way through it. I really want to give compliments to all the staff, from taking on voluntary temperature checks to enter into parts of the building, to obtaining personal protective equipment, which was left to individual agencies basically to obtain, to the creating of procedures and cleaning of items, as we suddenly had to recall that we still had to deal with our vehicles in a mobile environment, our sub offices, our main offices, and of course our police officers still had to go out and interact with individuals, whether they be as victims or just interacting with the public, or whether they be a subject of complaints. We were still actively involved in doing that. We had created an alternate shifting pattern. We actually went through 3 different versions of it, and compliments to the Transit Police Union, who were very flexible in their ability to work with us and make changes as we went. In addition, the picture on the right, which is there, we of course touch on 22 different jurisdictions, and we were there to support, and they were there to support us, was our policing partners, as we moved into this phase. And the picture you see there, you'll see red displayed. It was taken as our members were, I guess, recognizing the tragedy in Nova Scotia at that time, and the RCMP member who was passed away during the altercations. So we continue to work with our policing partners, which included, which we'll touch on now, comes into some of these protests and events and that are occurring in the community. So next slide, Stephen. So operating during it, this to touch on this quickly, was employee health, safety and business continuity, training and enforcement. So of course, it was unique in that transit saw a significant decrease in ridership, 70+% decrease. You'll see in a slide later on that didn't equate to a similar drop in calls for service to ourselves. There were decreases, but they were not at a rate of 70%. They were in the smaller areas of 5 and 11%. And calls for service, while they did drop initially, started returning. Part of that is that you got to remember that the vast majority of people who use the transit system are law-abiding people who are just using the system for their transportation needs and that. So you're not going to consider that if you lose 70% of a group of I'm going to say peaceful, law-abiding citizens, that you're going to see a correlation of a 70% drop in other issues that are occurring, whether it be nuisance-related, non-criminal, or criminal mental health items that we were still dealing with. In fact, there was a bit of a change in some of the services we had to provide that to match it. While I would say members of the vulnerable community, people who are vulnerable in the communities, were in and around or moved around a bit more, and were accessing some of the transit services that were not being used or were had that significant decline in ridership. So employee health, public health, safety and business continuity, and of course training and enforcement, new equipment, new personal protective equipment, new rules about safety, and of course laws and public health orders were a big part of making sure that our members knew what to enforce, how to enforce, and of course, when I say enforce, it was really education. We needed to educate people on what the safety processes or public health orders meant. Next slide, Stephen. This included, I just share with you, our communication center. This is a group of them working here. Really proud of this group. One is we are now fully staffed in our communication center without any vacancies. Last month alone, I think they occurred about $250 in overtime. That was it for a shift extension, which is a substantial increase in terms of it. They were the first ones in our organization to establish, over and above what we were looking at, they created temperature checks to go into that area. There were restricted staff in there. They were very vigilant as a team in making sure that they monitored their own health and other individuals' health. And we haven't lost any time in the communication center due to any COVID-related issues. And as I said, an indication is 100% staffing has occurred in this area. And again, thanks, just little things we were able to do. Each one of them has their own individual keyboard and mouse, and it's amazing when you find those little things that just make all the difference in giving them the comfort to do their job. Next slide. As you know, that or may have heard, there, of course, the Federal Quarantine Act came into play. At that time, with the Vancouver Police and the RCMP and the Transit Police took on an initiative to create an integrated Quarantine Act response and support team. And this was to follow up according to the orders of people coming back into the country who needed to quarantine. For the vast majority of people who returned to the country, it may have been a simple phone call from somebody, but there were people who had to be physically checked to make sure they were in compliance. With the role, of course, Vancouver geographically in a large area, and the RCMP, what they carry, and ourselves, because we were not only just touching on, we go through 22 communities, but the also that we touch on YVR Airport, and we were assisting the Richmond RCMP and airport security with the passengers arriving and leaving, and how they left, and making sure whether they were permitted or not permitted to use public transportation. So this started up with, we had 4 members assigned there. Really some excellent reviews back and comments back. All of our members who attended or worked as part of this came with language skills, second language, third language skills, which is really invaluable. And as of this time, that has been scaled back, and we still remain with 1 member assigned to this team. Next slide, Stephen. Impact on recruitment. We were scheduled to have 6 recruits go into the May class and 6 recruits go into the September class. This was not for increase. That was just to meet the demands based on attrition through retirements within the organization. The May class at the Justice Institute has been canceled, and I just say that it was scrubbed. The Justice Institute of BC shut down for a period of time. They are now back up and running with some training in Block 3, which is the last level of training before the recruits graduate. We have 9 people who had to return for that this month. They should graduate in August. And then the Justice Institute's looking at starting another class in September of this year for Block 1 recruits, of which it appears we will have 6 seats in that class. So that's only 50% of what we needed for the rest of the year. We will be, there is an impact on every municipal or independent police agency with this change at the Justice Institute of BC, and what they will be able to handle for the going forward in the future to try and make it up. We are planning on, we do have 6 recruits and candidates to fill the 6 seats that we have there. It is tentatively scheduled to go ahead in September, but that'll only bring it, that will create a bit of a gap because it takes about 10 months to graduate a recruit. Next slide. This is just awareness. Of course, you saw there was a lot of appreciation to healthcare workers and the many jurisdictions we're in, Vancouver, Port Moody, Surrey, Burnaby. We're actively involved in doing this. I also want to reach out and extend it to not only the healthcare workers, but you know, there are a lot of people from all frontline responders, including the police, including those that worked in grocery stores and you know, to get the food out and maintain sanitation and that. There are a lot of people, I think, that we always have to recall were not really given an option of not having to go to work. They had to learn how to do things safely and differently. And I don't think we can ever underestimate that role that happened, including our own members, when they're in one of these roles. And we always talk about it, if something happens, you're still going to have to go to work. This is one of these moments. But certainly deserving was the healthcare workers, which was occurring regularly. Next slide, Stephen. Just as a bit of a touch on this slide, it shows that crimes against person and crimes against property per 100,000 ridership. And you'll see that as ridership went way down in April, our crimes per persons, but crimes per property maintained about the same ratio. We're down about 11% and 5%. So it just kind of correlates, just to give a quick snapshot, that people might have initially thought, well, your ridership's gone, so you must have nothing to do. We actually had a lot to do, and our members were kept very busy based on still calls for service as to what was coming in addition to new types of nuances in calls for service and assistance that we were providing as a result of COVID-19. And some of them, just to describe, you got to remember when we started talking about social distancing, keeping distance. So there were people who would become concerned about distances, say on the transportation systems, the buses, or on the train, if someone being too close or someone maybe appearing to be ill, and they'd be reaching out to us with those concerns about what was happening within those, or we would see conflicts arise. In addition, we also spent time, some jurisdictions saw a rise in break and enters that occurred as many shops and businesses were forced to close, were no longer monitored. Well, we have a lot of businesses in and around transportation hubs, so we created a series of files and that to ensure that our members were checking up on those areas, maintaining a presence to prevent and hopefully or deter and detect crimes that would happen in relation to the businesses that were associated or could potentially be targeted as a result of a up spike in certain areas. Next slide, Stephen. That's it for this part of the presentation. So, Madam Chair, I can either stop here or just keep going on with some of the other updates and stuff like that, and then wait for the end.
Well, does anybody have any questions now, or would we rather continue? I think let's just continue, and people will have their questions at the end.
Sure. So that was presented to the TransLink board yesterday. Just so you're aware, there were some questions from the TransLink board about this next topic, which is the calls for police reform. I think everyone is pretty much aware that there is a social movement and that has occurred throughout North America, if not the world, that is seeking to, perhaps change the way police operate, or at least the way we respond to certain calls, or whether we should be involved in certain calls for it, and how we function. I think that it's a growing discussion, and it's one that requires us to do some immediate, I would say, acknowledgement that we need to engage with people, listen, and be adaptable. And policing has always been adaptable. I think anyone, being in policing for 30 years, we've seen change occur. We've seen, different things be introduced, and maybe some people are a little bit more critical of it, such as different things like tasers or pepper sprays, and those are the use of force. But we've also seen change where police have been the constant. When I say the constant, we've always maintained a 24-hour service and availability and responsibility for safety. And while a lot of things we now address are not crime related, they are social livability issues. And so we've ended up, whether it be dealing with mental health, homelessness, and medical calls, such as the opioid overdose and that. And a lot of things have shifted to the police, either intentionally or unintentionally, in terms of it. So the calls for police reform right now are something that obviously everybody at a variety of levels are going to be engaged in and look at. In terms of it, the concern as we go through this here is that we also want to make sure, acknowledge that we can. everyone can all, I would say, everyone, including ourselves, has to say we can do better, or we can enhance training, and we can look at screening of how we hire, and we need to look at our systems that are in place to make sure that they don't perpetuate a bias or a racism type approach to what is happening in terms of it. So for us, I'd say we're a bit ahead. And when I say a bit ahead of the game, is only in the sense that places like Vancouver, Victoria, and even Abbotsford have started to look at programs such as the CSO programs, and that is an alternate to policing, or where policing doesn't need to be involved in certain tasks and in calls of it. So right now, it's there's no easy answer that's going to come out of this in terms of it, but it certainly changes in the midst and going to occur. And there's a time where we're going to need to lead and make sure we're involved and take a leadership role in doing it, but being very open and not coming to the table with the answers, but coming to the table with everyone seeking a true depth of what it is that we need to learn, and then finding the answers in a collective manner in terms of it. But I do want to emphasize here is that police officers, like everybody else, are part. There are a significant number of police officers who do a phenomenal job out there and do it with the right intent to do the right thing for the right reasons. And we need to make sure that they are also continued to be supported in their efforts as to what they've been doing, and not chastise an entire organization or an entire group of people because of the admitted, inappropriate actions of some, right? And I don't think any police leader has come out and excused what we saw, what happened in Minneapolis, or tried to find a reason for that other than to describe it as a criminal act. Next is just a couple other things that came out. You saw Out on Patrol came out. We're very proud that Constable Julian Poncion has led us through has led us in the world of relationships with the LGBTQ2S societies and groups. It's a new nonprofit organization called Out on Patrol. I think we're very proud to see that individuals feel not only proud of who they are, but to be open about it, and to be well received within policing and be well received by their departments and agencies and the public and that. And when I said about change, that is a big change over the years as to what, and when I say not necessarily recently, but 30, 40 years ago, that has come so far that I think we would all be proud of the members, and that organization includes members from all over, every agency, every organization within public safety, even outside of policing, such as sheriffs and correctional officers in that way. And last, I just point out as kind of an update is the other day we had appointed a full-time Indigenous liaison officer as Constable Kirk Rattray. He was one of our neighborhood police officers working in the Vancouver area. He is First Nations, and he is a phenomenal individual, like in terms of just his approach, his mannerisms. He has a lot of respect within not only the community, but with youth in the community. This tags along with a program we have received a provincial grant for to run. It's the Blue Eagle, I think, youth program, which will be a year-long program to engage with Indigenous youth. We'll be partnering up in Vancouver with the Vancouver Police Department and their Indigenous programs to support it. It'll be a weekly drop-in for Indigenous youth. But we were really proud to have Kirk do it. We had representatives from the Statlium, Coast Salish, Kikite, Indigenous leaders out to do a traditional smudge ceremony here the other day, which was really proud to be part of. And we look forward to a lot of improvement of relationships that we have and opening those doors. And Kirk, we are really happy to have him on board in this position. And that's where I'm going to end for that.
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Marie?
That was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Yeah, I'd like to say I'm delighted to hear about those initiatives. I think it's, obviously super important to continue to do that work and continue to build on it. And I appreciate what you said, Chief, about engaging and listening. I think that, all police services have to just spend some time really thinking hard about the speed of change and the issues that we're working on, and maybe the ones that we're not and need to. We're certainly delighted to see the Out on Patrol Constable Poncian is doing fantastic work on social media. His Coffee with Cop is great, but certainly there's a lot more that we can do, and a lot more that we should be doing to engage and to listen. And I'm really glad to hear about this full-time Indigenous liaison officer. I know that's been in the works for a while, and I'm delighted to hear that it's come to fruition, and congratulations to everybody.
Thanks.
Okay.
Sarah?
Yeah?
It's Murray. Just wanted to make the comment that I think the community liaison committee that you have formed, Dave?
Yes. Well, it was in place prior to myself getting here. It's the Transit Police Chief Community Committee.
Community committee. Yeah, I think it's very important. That's a very important committee. From my perspective, and ensuring that it covers a broad range of the people who have an interest in transit police service and who are protected by the transit police service. That we stay in tune with the various perspectives that are out there and take action where necessary. But I see that as especially in light of recent events, that we really keep our ear to the rail in relation to things that may need to be improved or changed or amended. But I appreciate the fact that you have that in your meeting regularly.
And so thanks, Murray. And I give you an example of what it means. So the committee we met by obviously video recently. And one of the things we were able to pass on, and as much as it has a potential just to be a small, I'll call it it's a big problem for some others, was that we have representations from the deaf community on the committee. And when social distancing came in to say, don't sit in this seat or don't sit near me, of course, they can't vocalize that. So they have to use hand gestures to people who don't understand sign language about a person being near them they feel uncomfortable on transit. And it was leading to a sense of uncomfort that some people in the deaf community felt there was almost an altercations about to begin because of them the trying to communicate. They didn't want someone that close to them. So we're able to, again, in a preventative manner, take that to TransLink itself to say, maybe we need to have designated seating where you've talked about disabled or that, is that we need to identify that also for the hard of hearing or visually impaired as well, because they are looking for comfort when they use the system as well, and trying to signify that I don't feel comfortable with you sitting near me, right? I'd rather not. So it serves a really good purpose. And I think I saw in the last meeting that it felt good listening to, it's a full committee, full representation, but when we get things like that, I think it just feels good that we can help out and know that we can make a change or avoid something in the future.
And how often do you meet with that committee?
I think it's 4 times a year, Taryn? 5.
5 times a year.
I go 4 times.
And Chief, is there a way to make, can we make public how people might find out more about that committee and maybe get involved or make submissions, help us understand more? Because, that kind of design, universal design principles that come in when we're thinking about, a particular group, whatever the group is, it really ends up applying to everything, right? Like as soon as you start building things with more people in mind, then even more people can benefit until we all really benefit. And so So if we can have that committee be more available to people as one more avenue to communicate with us, that would be terrific.
Sure. So I'll talk to Stephen and Taryn, and just to get the right concept, they actually have a chair, which is it's run by the community. So they, and they have a membership list because they're looking for diverse, because they look for diversity throughout the region, not only just from regional and different perspectives, but certainly even just raising the specter of the community and people's access to even, getting feedback from what's happened or making submissions or being part of it. They have a membership type of group where they make their own, kind of go out and recruit and solicit for certain individuals. So say, we like to have somebody from the university bodies. There's the Indigenous, there is the deaf, there is crime prevention committees. It is a really wide breadth of individuals, seniors in terms of it. So it's a good group, but we'll take that and see, how we can give them greater exposure and the public access to it.
Yeah, the more ways that we can hear from people, I think the better.
Yep.
Everyone on this board, and I know senior leadership in the Metro Vancouver Transit Police are open to hearing things and wanting more information and out seeking it. But we definitely want to open those channels.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
I think one of the great things about that committee is that in addition to meeting in person 5 times a year, we also have a variety of opportunities to go out and work with them in various functions out in the community. So Surrey Crime Prevention Society, we work alongside with a variety of, safety campaigns within Surrey. Pathways Clubhouse usually has an annual event that we attend. So there's a variety of opportunities to partner alongside them. And one of the things we are continually trying to do is to obviously promote those on social media, those opportunities where members of the community can both come out and meet with us and also meet with them, and we can receive that feedback. And it's just one of those things where our comms team needs to, and they are doing a very good job, just keep on top of that and ensure that we're continuing to promote the opportunities that council provides.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
The other thing that, from my perspective, like cultural sensitivities need to be recognized. Refugees and immigrants that may not be familiar with sort of the trust that they can place in the police, understanding our processes, that the Canadian approach to policing and things like that, I think are all important to communicate and to hear feedback about. So I laud the committee. The only encouragement I would have is make sure that it remains broadly based.
Yeah, I would agree. And in terms of, what's been happening, I think we all agree that we know that the egregious acts that we've seen recently are they're carried out at the hands of individuals, I would say, but I think, it's reminded all of us that we have a job to do, to look at what we're doing and do better in terms of making sure that we're not contributing to systems and institutions that perpetuate or facilitate or turn a blind eye to these kinds of things, but instead that we really think hard and carefully about what we can all do to improve the system and really eradicate those kinds of discriminatory behaviors that I know nobody wants to tolerate. Okay, end of my speech. Let's move on to other business. And can we have a report from the Finance Committee Chair?
Good morning, everyone. The Finance Committee has no new business to report.
I'll unmute. I'm currently chairing the Governance Committee. And so we'll move on to item 4.2. I have a few notes. You've already talked about some of that, Chief. You've talked about the work on the strengthening support to Indigenous people's work that we're doing, including the Indigenous full-time Indigenous liaison role, which is fantastic. We're doing other work to develop the community engagement, which you talked about. We're continuing to move ahead with a little slowly because some of that was suspended on the strategic plan, but we're going to start moving that forward soon. And looking at the policies to address the needs arising from COVID and compliance with the changes in the law and provincial policing standards. So we've been fairly busy with those kinds of issues in the last while, and some of that's in the, well, all of it's in the meeting minutes, and that's the report from the governance committee. All right, no questions? So we're moving on to item 5 on the agenda. We have a letter from the Canadian Association of Police Governance seeking nominations to their board. And I would ask if anybody here is interested in sitting on that board. We can certainly nominate you. It's a terrific organization that does a lot of really good work educating police governance leaders across the country in these kind of really important critical issues in police governance, and allows people like us to meet people like us from across the country and learn from each other and take courses and advocate. So if anybody is interested in getting involved in that, let me know. Okay, you can think about it. Okay. So we're moving on to item 6. The next regular meeting of the Transit Police Board is scheduled for September 25th at 9 a.m. Okay. Final words? I guess we can close this portion of the meeting then.